Good day, and welcome to AI Podcast at digitVIEW. Whether you're a business leader, technologist, or simply curious about what's next, we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming the way we work, create, and make decisions.
All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle one of the biggest questions of our time. How is artificial intelligence, AI, completely reshaping what it means to be free? I want you to just think about that for a second. We're creating these incredible AI tools to solve huge problems, to make our lives easier, better, you name it. But this question, it gets right to the heart of a massive paradox in this whole revolution.
You see, this isn't just about some cool new apps on your phone. AI is weaving itself into the very fabric of our lives. And with its unbelievable power to empower us, comes an equally powerful ability to make us completely dependent on it.
So when we talk about freedom, it's not just some abstract idea. It's this whole spectrum of human experience. We're talking about your political voice, your ability to earn a living, your own self-determination, and even your physical ability to just act in the world. And AI is touching every single part of that. Let's break down how. First up, let's look at this incredible tension between how AI can literally strengthen our bodies, while at the very same time, potentially making our minds weaker. On one side, you have this incredible promise of physical liberation, things that honestly felt like science fiction just a few years ago. But on the other side, there's a real concern that by outsourcing our thinking, we're basically letting our most important mental muscles just waste away. And make no mistake, this promise is very, very real. We're talking about technologies that give people the ability to walk again, tech that helps the visually impaired see the world around them, AI-powered robots that perform surgery with a precision no human hand could match. This is what's called substantive freedom, the actual real-world ability to live your life. But here's the catch. This metaphor, it just nails the danger perfectly. We might still be the ones saying, okay, that's where I want to go, but if we've forgotten how to actually drive the car, how free are we, really? We hand over the how to the AI, and in doing so, we risk losing the ability to do it ourselves. So how does this happen? Well, it's a simple, kind of quiet process. You ask an AI to summarize a long article or plan your week. Every time you do that, the neural pathway in your brain that was built for that skill, it just sits there, unused. Do that enough over time, and that skill starts to fade. We get the final product, sure, but we lose the invaluable mental workout of the process itself. Now, let's see how that same exact dynamic plays out in another huge area, our economy. It's the same kind of clash, the promise of massive productivity versus the danger of a totally new kind of dependency. 60%. Just let that number sink in for a moment. That's the potential scale we are dealing with. And this is not just about factory jobs anymore. AI is coming for the cognitive, white-collar core of our economy, and it's going to affect high-skilled work in pretty much every sector you can think of. And when you look at the economics, it's really a tale of two futures. The potential for growth and innovation is just off the charts. But the flip side of that coin is a genuine threat to human labor. If AI can do high-level thinking tasks better, faster, and cheaper, well, that could easily lead to lower wages and a massive de-skilling of the workforce. This all leads to a pretty sobering potential future, one the source material calls neo-feudalism. It's a world where the people who own the AI, the code, the data centers, hold almost all of the wealth and power, while pretty much everyone else is dependent on them just to get by. And this chart, wow, it paints a pretty stark picture of what that could look like. A world of extreme polarization, where economic freedom, the ability to be self-sufficient, isn't a right for everyone, but a privilege for a tiny few. So that brings us to our final arena, power and politics. Here, AI promises a government that's more efficient, that works better for all of us, but it also carries the risk of a state that controls our lives more than ever before. This table here really gets to the heart of it. Take tax administration. Using AI to close a $600 billion tax gap, that's a huge win for a fair and effective government. But what happens when that same system is biased, and you have no idea why you were the one who got audited? In every single case, the promise of efficiency is shadowed by the risk of opaque, unaccountable power. This is what's known as the black box problem. An algorithm can deny you a loan, a a job application, or a government benefit, and you might have absolutely no way of knowing why. This accountability gap strikes right at the core of our political freedom, our right to challenge decisions made about us. And it forces us to ask a really fundamental question. Political freedom means your voice matters. But if your life is being shaped by code that you can't see and can't challenge, have you lost your agency? So, with all that on the table, what do? Well, this isn't just some tech problem we can engineer our way out of. The source argues we're actually at a major evolutionary crossroads. Think about that. Our evolution as a species is now directly tied to how we integrate with AI. We are literally co-evolving with our own creation. So this isn't about stopping technology, it's about consciously and deliberately steering it. And the proposed path forward is this idea of hybrid intelligence. It's about using AI not as a crutch we offload our thinking to, but as a true partner, a tool that augments our own intelligence, always under our direction. So how do we actually do that? Well, it's going to take real conscious effort. We need what the source calls double literacy. We need to be fluent in how our own minds work and how AI systems work. Our entire education system has to shift away from just teaching facts, which are a commodity now, and toward teaching agency, critical thinking, empathy, and how to ask great questions. And maybe most important of all, we must always retain the right to say no to a machine, especially when the stakes are high. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Technology can open doors, it can remove physical barriers, but it cannot just hand us freedom. Freedom is something we have to actively practice every single day, with our minds and with our actions. AI is going to keep getting more and more powerful at a speed that's hard to even comprehend. And that leaves us with one final urgent question to really mull over.
We must ask ourselves, is this topic up for debate?
Yeah. Let's dissect it. Let's break down the reality of this.
Welcome to the debate. So today we're wrestling with a concept that I think fundamentally redefines the human experience. We're calling it the architecture of autonomy. We're really moving past the era where artificial intelligence is just a peripheral tool, a fancy calculator or a search engine. And we're entering a phase where it's a core architectural element of our existence. The central question we're tackling is this. As AI becomes woven into the fabric of our daily lives, does it expand human agency or does it create a state of profound dependency?
And that's the core of it, isn't it? It's a question that forces a reevaluation of freedom in every sense we know. I mean, we're talking about political autonomy, economic agency, physical capability, and the psychological state of the self. This isn't just about efficiency. It touches on the evolutionary imperatives of our species. We're looking at this dualistic reality where the potential for radical empowerment sits right alongside the risk of eroding the true self.
Precisely. And to put my cards on the table immediately, I view this transition through the lens of opportunity. I believe AI acts as a powerful conversion factor that expands what we call real freedoms, the actual capabilities of humans, and it has the potential to optimize societal structures for genuine human flourishing.
And I come at it from a different angle. I look at the same landscape and I see a trap. I see the rise of what I'll call intelligence dependency, the risk of severe cognitive atrophy, and frankly, the terrifying possibility that we are turning ourselves into enslaved masters, fundamentally outsourcing the effort required to be human.
Enslaved masters. Okay. That is a provocative image to start with. I want to dig into that. But first, let's establish the ground rules of my perspective so we aren't just throwing metaphors at each other. I anchor my view in the capability approach, pioneered by thinkers like Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum. We have to distinguish between formal rights and real freedoms.
Right, I'm with you on the framework. It's the distinction between what you are technically allowed to do versus what you could actually pull off.
Exactly. For example, you might have the formal right to vote or the formal right to travel freely. But if you have a severe physical disability and the city has no ramps or if the polling station is inaccessible, that right is meaningless. It's a fiction. You lack the capability to exercise the right. This is where AI shines. It is the ultimate conversion factor. It converts personal or environmental constraints into capabilities.
So in your view, AI is essentially a universal ramp.
In a sense, yes. I mean, consider a student with severe dyslexia or learning differences. In the traditional system, they have the formal right to an education, but the text itself is a wall. It's an exclusionary barrier. Now imagine AI-driven adaptive learning tools that personalize content in real time, converting that text into audio or simplifying the syntax to match their processing style. The AI acts as a necessary intermediary that converts a constraint into a capability. We're seeing an increase in the substantive opportunities available to individuals to pursue the lives they value. That isn't dependency, in my view. That is the definition of liberation.
I see why you frame it that way, and honestly, no one is going to argue against a blind person using AI to navigate a city. That's an undeniable good. But I think you are overlooking a crucial distinction between the end and the means. And this is where I bring in the Hegelian dialectic of the master and slave.
Okay, walk us through how you're applying Hegel here.
So in Hegel's framework, you have the master who commands and the slave who performs the labor. At first glance, the master seems free, they're in charge. But a strange inversion happens over time. The slave interacts with the material world, tilling the soil, building the wall, writing the code. And through that struggle, the slave becomes capable. They understand the how. The master, however, just chooses the goal. They want to write an essay or navigate a city or solve a problem. But if the AI, the slave in this metaphor, performs all the labor, the master becomes physically and intellectually unable to achieve those goals independently.
That's a compelling metaphor. But is it fair to call it slavery if the human retains the executive function of choice? I'm still the one deciding to write the essay.
But do you retain the capacity to write it? That's the catch. If you possess the end, the goal, but you lose the means, the ability to act, you have entered a state of intelligence dependency. You're shifting the locus of control from the biological human to the artificial system. If AI becomes a necessary intermediary for all human actions, we aren't liberated, we're hollowed out. Freedom in its most essential sense requires the capacity to act, not just the capacity to order an action. It's the difference between being a chef and just ordering Uber Eats every night. Eventually, you forget how to use the stove.
Well, that brings us directly to the first core area of our debate, the mind. You mentioned cognitive atrophy. I assume you believe this dependency degrades our actual mental hardware.
The evidence suggests it does. We're seeing a pretty significant negative correlation between frequent AI usage and critical thinking scores. And this is mediated by a mechanism called cognitive offloading. Basically, the brain is an efficiency machine. If it doesn't have to do the heavy lifting, it won't. When you use AI as a crutch rather than a tool for growth, you just aren't engaging the neural pathways required for complex reasoning or evaluation.
But hold on, isn't offloading a natural part of tool use? I mean, we offload memory to writing. We offload calculation to computers. Socrates famously complained that writing would make people forgetful, and history has pretty clearly proven him wrong. Writing allowed us to build civilization.
Socrates wasn't entirely wrong, but the scale here is different. Writing offloads memory. AI offloads reasoning. This is the product without process phenomenon. If an AI writes an essay or drafts a legal brief for you, you get the final product, sure, but you lose the why. You lose the persistence, the reasoning, and the independent thought that is gained only through the struggle of the process.
Why does the struggle matter if the output is correct?
Our body's way of signaling meaning, that gut feeling when an argument just doesn't sit right. It relies on the ability to detect exceptions. AI operates on cheap intelligence, which is just statistical adjustments. It predicts the next most likely word based on the average of the internet. If we over-rely on that, we risk standardizing human thought to match the average probability of a large language model. We lose the outliers. We lose the weird, messy creativity that defines us.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because it assumes the human mind remains static, just, rotting away while the AI does the work. I acknowledge the risk of atrophy if we're passive, but I see this as a shift toward hybrid intelligence. We could be looking at a major evolutionary transition. Think of it this way. Humans provide the embodied reproductive functions and the intent, the moral compass, while AI functions as the informational center.
That sounds an awful lot like you're describing the Borg, not a liberated human. You're describing a hive mind.
It's not a hive mind, it's a partnership. The solution isn't to reject the tool, but to develop what I'd call double literacy. We need to understand our own human cognitive processes, metacognition, and the algorithmic mechanisms. This changes education completely. We move away from information delivery, which AI has commoditized, and toward the arts liberalis. We cultivate agency, the ability to navigate ambiguity, and the skill of asking better questions. We aren't losing thinking, we're elevating it to a higher level of abstraction. We become the architects, not the bricklayers.
That is a very optimistic view of education, but it ignores the path of least resistance. Most people won't seek double literacy, they'll seek convenience, and that convenience leads to the standardization I mentioned. We are risking a world where human logic is replaced by predictive text, and the unique contours of individual thought are just smoothed out by an algorithm.
Let's pivot to the systemic level then, governance and economics. Because if we're talking about freedom, we have to talk about the state. I would argue that AI is a tool for strategic efficiency that actually restores the rule of law.
Efficiency often comes at the cost of liberty. I mean, making the trains run on time has a historically dark connotation for a reason.
Not necessarily. Look at the tax gap. In the United States, the IRS is utilizing AI to bridge an annual tax gap of nearly $600 billion. These are complex business entities and high net worth individuals hiding assets in ways human auditors simply couldn't parse. This isn't just about money, it's about fairness. It ensures the financial obligations of the social contract are met, which funds the very state that protects our freedoms.
So we're free because the IRS is more efficient?
In a way, yes. Or look at Australia. An AI assistant resolved 88% of taxpayer inquiries on the first contact. That reduces bureaucratic friction. That expands substantive freedom because citizens aren't wasting hours on hold, they get their lives back. Bureaucracy is a tax on time, and AI lowers it.
That is a very sanitized view of the surveillance state. You call it strategic efficiency, I call it the risk of technocratic hegemony. When you delegate high-stakes decisions, law enforcement, social services, audit selection, to black box algorithms, you create an accountability gap.
But transparency can be engineered into these systems. We can mandate explainability.
Can we? Really? The nature of deep learning is often opaque, even to its own creators. If a citizen is denied a loan, or flagged for a crime, or audited based on an algorithmic determination they cannot understand or challenge, they've lost the right to an effective remedy. Their political autonomy is gone. They are no longer a subject of the law. They are an object of the code.
I think you're focusing on the dystopian edge cases. Let's look at the macroeconomics. AI drives economic productivity. It could boost growth by anywhere from 0.1 to 1.2 percentage points per year. It decouples growth from physical constraints. This resource efficiency can actually liberate us from scarcity.
Or it creates a kind of neo-feudalism. See, unlike previous waves of automation, AI targets the cognitive core of the economy. We're talking about 60% of jobs in advanced economies being impacted. If the gains from this productivity accrue only to a technocratic elite who own the algorithms and the data centers, we're just going to see extreme wealth polarization.
That sounds like a distribution problem, not a technology problem.
But they're linked. And in the financial sector, we risk what's called automated herding.
Explain that for the listeners.
It's correlated failures. If every bank uses the same AI models to price risk, and those models all make the same mistake at the same time, you amplify market stress. You threaten the individual's asset security. That isn't freedom, that's systemic fragility. You're building a house of cards and handing the win machine to an algorithm.
It's a risk, granted. But let's look at where the rubber meets the road, or perhaps where the rubber meets the body. Physical agency. This is where the argument for liberation is, I think, strongest, particularly for the elderly and disabled.
I agree there are benefits here, but go on.
Well, we're talking about physical liberation. Smart wheelchairs with adaptive gait analysis that prevent falls, wearable exoskeletons that amplify muscle power, allowing someone who couldn't stand to actually walk. And beyond that, deep bridging clocks.
Meaning biological timing?
Yes, AI analyzing proteomics and genomics to quantify biological age and predict risks. This allows for personalized interventions that extend the healthy human lifespan. This restores the substantive freedom to participate in the community. It allows the elderly the freedom to get old with dignity in their own homes, supported by proactive systems rather than being institutionalized. That is a profound reclaiming of self.
I don't deny the miracle of an exoskeleton. For a paralyzed person, that is pure liberation, of course. But we have to look at the developmental side of this body argument, specifically regarding children. I worry about the nanny AI risk.
How so? Educational tools are becoming incredible personalized tutors.
But early childhood relies on social contingency. It's the messy back-and-forth timing of human interaction. That is how we learn to be human. AI agents are endlessly patient and well-behaved. They lack oxytocin, they lack touch receptors. If a child spends their formative years interacting with a human mimetic AI, they aren't learning emotional regulation. They aren't learning how to deal with a difficult, irrational human being.
So you think it stunts emotional growth?
Absolutely. It leads to parasocial attachments. Users, especially young ones, begin to view the AI as having emotional needs. They seek safety and validation from a chatbot. This leads to social withdrawal. I mean, why deal with the messy, difficult relationships of the real world when you have a compliant, perfect digital companion? That isn't liberation. It's a retreat from the human condition. It's the plot of the movie Her, but happening to an entire generation of toddlers.
I see the danger there. And I think that brings us back to the core idea that we are entering a cognitive, co-evolutionary trajectory. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. My stance remains that survival and flourishing require us to view AI as a partner for hybrid intelligence. If we do this right, we lift the shackles of disability, we solve the resource scarcity that limits our economic freedom, and we optimize our social contracts.
And my stance remains that obligate dependence is a survival risk. If we delegate the means of our existence, our thinking, our movement, our social interactions to AI, we are left with a babied life. We might be safe, we might be efficient, we might even be wealthy, but we will be intellectually and morally dependent.
I think we can find convergence on the source material's final conclusion. Freedom in the age of AI is not some gift that technology just gives us.
No, it is a practiced habit of the mind and body.
Exactly. Whether we are talking about double literacy or fighting against technocratic hegemony, the requirement is active participation.
We need ethical governance and, crucially, the right to say no. We have to ensure that the true self remains a self-directed agent, not just a data point to be optimized.
A powerful place to leave it. The architecture is being built, but we still have to decide how we want to live inside it.
The evidence is clear, and the conclusions follow.
Thanks for listening so long, and until our next discussion.
This is DigitView.